Good boy, Tucker.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Work smarter where you want.
Consistency is key.
And remember, if it's not in Redtail, it never happened.
This is learning at its most fun.
Hello, everyone. My name is Haley Mandrup. I'm one of the trainers at Redtail Technology. And joining us today is Redtail Malcolm. He's one of our pups that joins us every day in the office. And I just thought we needed a little cheering up today because our topic is client death. So it's not something, we like to talk about. We certainly don't like it when clients pass away, but it happens. And I have a shocking statistic for everyone, but 100% of people die. So it's very real. It's a very common thing that comes up in our advisory practices as we're managing our clients in Redtail CRM. So we thought, let's have a way to handle client death within the CRM and it kind of a standardized process within the CRM on managing and keeping track of and reaching out to those clients and keeping track of that relationship after a client passes away, because we want to engage the family and send our condolences, but we also have some very real tasks to get done in your office, like getting the death certificate and go ahead and closing accounts or notifying beneficiaries or so on and so forth. So without further ado, let's talk about some of the database management things that we need to do when a client passes away. So the very first thing that you're going to want to do when a client passes away is when you're notified, however you're notified, maybe a family member calls you. I've had offices check the obituaries every morning to find out that clients pass away, depending on your office structure, your community, wherever you're at. However you're notified, the very first thing that you do is change the client status. So the status is your relationship with that person or your business's relationship with that person, and it's a representation of the client life cycle. So your statuses should be lead, prospect, active client, and then there's two statuses for when they leave your services. The first is inactive. See ya, they left for whatever reason. And then the second is deceased, because that's a very different way of leaving than going inactive. So we want to keep track of the clients that go inactive for the different reasons. The first being they just left, and the second is they actually passed away, and that's a different reason for leaving. So we're going to change that contact status within the database. Now, you can't change the status to deceased if you don't first have a deceased status within the database. So for you admins or database owners, you can add this within the CRM. So we're going to go into the CRM. You can add a new status by going to your name in the top right-hand corner and then manage your account. And then all the way down at the bottom, this admins only section is going to give us the manage database list page that we are looking for ultimately. So the manage database list page gives us the option on the right-hand side to go into our statuses and add a new status that did not exist previously. So we do want to add a deceased status here if you don't already have it. If you're not the admin and you can't access this page, that's okay. Not everyone should have admin access, but instead what you're going to do is just let the admin know in your office or let the boss know, the advisor, whoever the owner is of the database, to go ahead and add that. So that's step one. We want to make sure that we can define our relationship with these people as being different than our active clients or prospects or other groups of people. Second is we're going to update some various fields on the contact record. And I left this as very general because it's as general or as specific as you want to get with it. So first, we have a date of death field. So when you're on a contact record, there is a hidden field, and I call it hidden because it doesn't show until it's filled out. So on the contact details over here on the right-hand side, we've got the option to edit, and there is a date of death field right here in the contact details. But you'll notice if I exit out of here in the contact details, we don't see the date of death field anywhere in the contact details. It will not show until it's actually populated in the contact record. So once we click edit, we can go ahead and fill out that date of death field. And then once it's populated, it will show and display, and it's reportable from there. The other one that I'd like to point out on that front actually is the client termination date as well. They passed away, they've terminated client services probably at the same time. That depends on your own preference. I've had some offices say the date that they pass away is the date that we enter in as their termination date, but you can also say that maybe they've passed away on a certain date and then the date that all their accounts are closed and you're actually done with the date of death, or the deceased client process is actually the termination date. So that's up to you guys, but you would also want to enter in a termination date because it's searchable and reportable as well. All right, so after those fields, there are other fields that you can populate. Maybe you want to enter a note, or maybe you want to go ahead and change their marital status or change the living spouse's marital status. But as far as Redtail recommendations go, the date of death and the termination date are the two most important fields to go ahead and fill out on that contact record. Next is going to be to update family. So let's talk about family for a second, should we? Family is going to be the tax definition of family. So likely they're going to be married to somebody maybe and have dependents possibly. So you're going to want to update that familial relationship, especially if they're the head of household that does pass away. And we're going to alter the family relationship because now there's a new head of household, or there's someone new that we need to be in contact with and adjust all of our mailings for. So I'm training in terms of it being the head of household that passes away, because that's where the most amount of work lies. If it's a dependent or a spouse that passes away, just bear with me through this section. So if the head of household passes away, you're going to adjust the family. So I'm going to go over to our contact record, and we've got Victor here. Victor's married to Victoria. I'm going to go to their family section. Now, if he'd passed away, then what I would do is, the first thing I'm going to do is move him and change his family relationship. So I could remove him from the family, but sometimes some offices don't like to remove him from the family right away. You might actually prefer to move him as a dependent other for the time being. So that is a possibility. I do want to point it out. I recommend removing them from the family just in case you have any mailings set up on family name, or that will pull in spouse name or anything like that, or you run a personal profile form. But the official Redtail recommendation is to go ahead and adjust them. So we're gonna adjust this contact. So I apologize. We're going to change the head. So we're going to go to the settings wheel over here on the left-hand side, and then we're going to change the head. Lay down. Thank you. And then we're going to change the head of household to Victoria and reset. So it would switch them around, and then we could then move him to a dependent as well. And then we could adjust him over here. So I'm going to switch him back because we're not quite ready to have him leave the family yet. Malcolm, come back. Come on. Lay down. Good boy. All right. I know it's a sad subject, but it'll get happier, okay? Okay. So after we adjust the family and he's moved out of the family, we're going to add a membership. And memberships are all those other relationships that are not the tax definition of family, but we still want to retain that Victor and Victoria were married at one point in time and that he's still a contact record in our database. So memberships are over here on the left-hand side under more, and then memberships, just a little bit more down here. And the memberships, like I said, they're all other relationships. My favorite types of memberships are going to be extended family. So uncles, cousins, ex-spouses, ex-wife, ex-husband, and then also all of your associations. So Rotary clubs, maybe charitable organizations, you can really start to see and get a holistic picture of who is this contact to me, and then who is this contact in my greater community. So if you're very community oriented and you've got a lot of ties, you're going to start to notice that a lot of your clients have a lot of the same connections as well. Maybe multiple of them are in a Rotary organization or some kind of community association. So what we would do is we would go ahead and add a membership for Victor, and we're going to link him to his wife, Victoria. And the linked contact, I like to talk my memberships through out loud. So the linked contact is Victoria. So she is the surviving spouse because she is not deceased in this situation. In this situation, Victor has passed away. So we would scroll down here to surviving spouse or living spouse. And Victoria is the linked contact. The linked contact is the living spouse. The contact that we are on, he is the deceased spouse. So I'm going to select deceased spouse there and add that membership. And I don't have to go to Victoria's record too and add that Victor is linked to her. It actually just created a link between those two contact records for me. So I only have to add it to one record. If they had children though, I would need to add it to each of the children. So they would know that I could link them to the deceased parent possibly, or however you wanted to define that relationship. So memberships is the next place to go because that'll give us a look at the surviving family. So in the future, anyone in my office can reference Victor's record if they end up on his, or more importantly, Victoria's. When they end up on Victoria's record, they'll know, okay, Victor passed away, here's his record, I can go over to it. Now the next one is to remove the client review date. So there is a client review reminder within Redtail that's just a really simple frequency that keeps you on track for reaching out for your client reviews. So when someone passes away, you want to remove that client review so the review is no longer going to populate the calendar or your review reports or the to-date overview. And more importantly, removing it, I should have put add here as well, because we're removing it from the deceased contact, but we're also adding it to the living contact. So the spouse or the beneficiary or whoever's inheriting those funds and hopefully staying on as a client, we're going to add it to their record. So, and by remove, I would just go to Doom's record. I can click on his next review here. It'll take me directly to his page. You can also go to Know Your Client on the left-hand side, and then client review will be on this page as well. So to remove it, I would go ahead and edit and then delete the first review date. And that's going to take away all of its repeating frequency. We'll just adjust that to never, and now it's gone, it's off his record. Then after I would update that client review, I'm going to go over to Victoria's record and add the review on her page because she's the new client. So what's cool, I don't know if you guys caught that. What's cool is I was on Victor's page, and when I clicked on Victoria, it took me directly to her client review section. So you don't have to go to Victoria and then click on client review. Instead, you can just click on her name at the top, and then it'll take you directly over to the client review page. So here I'm on Victor's, and I click on Victoria, and now I'm on Victoria's. So it's a little more convenient, saves you some clicks there. And I can add the review. Next, we would add a note of all changes. Now this one's my favorite because it really depends on how your office is currently entering notes in the system, but there's a really neat feature here. So depending on how your office enters notes, you may always enter everything on the head of households record, or when something happens like a withdrawal is requested or a client review happens, you might always link the contact and the spouse to that activity or that note. If you do the first option, if you only add notes to the contact record, then when someone passes away, all of those notes are on that contact's record. So you may want to move those notes to the surviving spouse's record. And we do have an easy way for you to do that. So if I was on Victor's record and I went to his notes page, he's passed away, I want to go ahead and move his notes, there's an option here to move notes over, and it really is a move. So it takes them from one location and puts them with all of their same date and time stamped records in Victoria's record, which is who I would be moving it to. So it actually physically moves them from one location to another. Now, if you're the kind of office that's like, no, we enter notes on both records all the time, then you don't have to do this option. You'd already have all the notes on Victoria's record for reference and all of that. So it just depends on how you guys manage it. But the cool option here is if you do move the notes or if you don't move the notes, either way, I would recommend adding a note to Victor's record that Victor passed away, and all notes after this day should be on Victoria's record. Now, when I say Victoria, I might have 700 Victorias in my database. So I want to make sure that whoever is referencing this record later knows which Victoria I'm talking about. Because the CRM is dynamic and it's a web-based CRM, you can actually insert a link to Victoria's record. So first we need to get the link to Victoria's record. So I'll exit out of that note. I'll go back to Victoria's record just by clicking on her name here. And I'm just going to copy the URL up here on the top of the page. So that's the website address for Redtail CRM, but more specifically, Redtail CRM Victoria Doom's contact record. And then I'm going to go back over to Victor's record, and I'm going to add that note again. I'm going to make sure to copy that. So I'm on Victoria's record, copy, that's Control C, or right click and choose copy, and then we're going to go back over to Victor's record. And then we're going to add the note. Now what's cool is I don't have to retype all that information because there is a show drafts option down here at the bottom, and it saved my note for me. It'll save up into the last 20 keystrokes. So we can go ahead and copy. It's going to throw my note right back at the top. You don't have to watch me type again. And then I'm going to highlight Victoria's name and click on this little linked symbol. It's supposed to look like a chain link. It kind of does if you squint a little. And we're going to click on that chain link option, and it's going to give us a box that says URL. Well, that works out very nicely because I have the URL, and I'm going to paste it in there. And then there's one additional thing I would mention on this one. You can change the target to a new window. That way, when somebody does click on it, it opens Victoria in a new browser tab. It doesn't switch whatever page you're on over to Victoria. So that's just a preference for you all. And then I'm going to click OK. And now we've got it underlined in blue. Well, I didn't underline it, and I didn't make it blue, but it's a hyperlink. So I'm going to categorize this note and save it. And now anytime somebody comes onto Victor's record, they're going to notice right away this note, because it'll be the last note on his record, very likely. And then they'll know, oh, okay, all notes after this day regarding all of his accounts are in Victoria. And when I clicked on that, it took me to a new tab up here in the browser with Victoria's record. It's very cool. We added a note with all of the changes. And then the very last thing we're going to do is complete and delete any future activities. Just in case you have a repeating activity for a monthly withdrawal from an account that deceased client owned, it's very important to check and make sure that you're completing and deleting those future activities, or maybe moving them over to the surviving spouse if those withdrawals are supposed to continue. Lita? So to complete and delete those future activities, we're going to still be on Victor's record. So we'll jump back over to Victor. And then we're going to go to his activities page. And then for his activities page, we can filter the dates. We could do next 12 months because likely if you have a repeating activity, it would be in the next 12 months. But just to be safe, I would recommend doing a ridiculous date range. I always say whenever you want to see everything in the CRM, set it to a ridiculous date range. And what I mean by ridiculous is going back to like 2000 and going out to like 2030. Because if you have anything past that, it probably doesn't matter. I'm gonna venture a guess to say it doesn't matter if it was before the year 2000 and after the year 2030. So he has nothing, but if he did have anything, then I could go ahead and assign them over to Victoria, or if it was a repeating activity, then I would want to go into it and change it over to Victoria. And you could just leave it linked to Victor's record. That's not going to hurt anything. If anything, it's just going to add more notes to his record. But this is all a lot of information, right? I hope you're not scribbling furiously down as you're watching this webinar, because all of this information in this process sounds like it should be something that's repeatable within the database that anybody could pull up. And oh, we have a feature for that. It's a workflow. So this client deceased process, the best way to manage it is really through a workflow in the CRM. And if you're watching this webinar and going, gosh, I haven't even watched the workflow webinars yet, I'm not ready to get started with that, the client death process is a great workflow to use to get started and get comfortable, because you're going to be going through the same tasks likely when a client passes away. And it's just easier to adjust with a process like this. So what would that workflow look like? This is what that workflow would look like. Step one would be office tasks. What do we have to handle when a client passes away? Well, first, this is just me, but first I'd send condolences. Second, I'd acquire the death certificate. There might be some time between the two. You probably don't want to call and be like, I'm sorry that so-and-so passed away, but also, do you have the death certificate by chance? Maybe give them a little breathing room depending on your office and how you always handle that. And then you're going to go through everything that we just talked about. Update the date of death, update the family name, update the head of household, and go through all of those tasks. So that would be step one, getting everything handled. And then you can add more tasks depending on if accounts need to be closed and beneficiaries need to be notified, or maybe you want to set up a meeting, maybe you want to attend the funeral or memorial, whatever is happening. All of that could be part of the workflow. And then we added a second step to the workflow for the client relationship. I know it's a shock because it's your client relationship management system, your CRM. But for the client relationship, we've just heard from clients and working with offices all over the country that it might be nice to recognize certain days following someone's passing. So you could also have the workflow set up so that you can reach out to them on Valentine's Day and send a card or flowers, or the surviving spouse's first birthday after their spouse passes away, or the deceased spouse's birthday, or the anniversary, the marital anniversary, and then finally the date of death anniversary. So all of these dates are dates that might even be overlooked by the family, but you as the advisor have the relationship with the client and the ability to reach out and really, it's not about capitalizing on it, it's about sharing with them and giving them that extra mile of service that at really no cost to you guys. Just send a card or send an email or really just a phone call and touch base with them and see, gosh, how are you doing? So you can customize your workflow to put in your own special sauce and put in what you currently do. So what this workflow looks like in the CRM is going to be under our templates. under my name in the top right-hand corner, and then manage my account. So my name, manage your account, and then under manage templates, we're going to go to workflow templates. And then under workflow templates, we have the client death workflow 2019. Now, of course, you can name this whatever you want to name it, but here's what it would look like in the system. We've got our office tasks. It's due on the date that the workflow is initiated, and we're going to go ahead and make sure that all of these things are handled. And then we've got the second step for client relationship, and this one does not have a due date because the dates for all of these would be varying and they would have to be manually set. So once the workflow is open, then you could go in and say, okay, this was when Victoria's birthday is. We're going to put Victoria's birthday in the workflow for us to reach out, and then it will show up on the calendar. All right, so what's cool about this workflow and is that you now have to still remember to attach the workflow when the client passes away, right? Gosh, now I have to remember to change their status and to attach the workflow. But the good news is we can make that a little bit simpler, still with Redtail, and we can actually automate part of that. And we're going to automate that through using an automation. So the automation is going to say, it's going to look at when you change statuses in the system and say, if you change the status to deceased, then I want you to link the client death workflow. So it's where you get to tell Redtail, if I do this, you do that. If I change a status to deceased, you, my CRM, link my client deceased workflow, and it assigns out all of those tasks for everyone in the office to go ahead and complete. So let's set that up. We're going to go to our name in the top right-hand corner, and then manage your account. And then we're going to go to manage templates, automation templates. Now we like to describe automations as an if-then statement. If I do this, then Redtail does that. So we are going to create a new automation here, add. And then I like to name the automations what they do. So client deceased workflow links on status change. It just says what it does plain and simple. And then you can put in the description, we as an office find it very important to reach out to clients' families as soon as there's been a death in the family. This process will ensure that a workflow is linked when a status is changed from client to deceased so that we can reach out in a timely manner. That would be a great description to put in there. Or you could just put do not delete or whatever you want to put. But the description is there for you to give direction, information, and just add that reminder to yourself and to everyone in your office why this automation is there and what it does. And that really becomes valuable as you start to add more automations. Because if this is your first, you're going to get really automation happy and start to want to add more and more automations. Our trigger event is what we are doing, what a user is doing in the system that sets off this action. So when I want the workflow to link, I want it to link based on a status being changed. So we're going to say contact status changed. Now, if a contact status is changed, then I want Redtail to do this action. And I want it to link a workflow from a template, and then it gives me a list of my available workflows. And that's going to be the client death workflow 2019. Now, the biggest issue we run into with automations is that you don't want to stop here, because all I've told the system to do at this point is if a status is changed from anything to anything, then link the client death workflow. That could become a problem really fast. I mean, if you're just thinking about how many times statuses get changed in your database, that could be a mess. Luckily, there is a bulk workflow delete option, but we don't want to have to use that. So we're going to add a condition to this and say we only want the client death workflow to link if the contact status is equal to deceased. Now, I know you're thinking, wait a minute, does that mean it was deceased and then it was changed to something else? Or does that mean it was something else and then changed to deceased? This means that the end value, what it was changed to, is deceased. So we want this to happen when a contact status is changed to deceased, and we want it to link the client death workflow. We're going to add that condition, and then we're going to create the automation. So now that that's live, I got some good news from our friend Reed Richards. He's been out fighting crime for us, and he went ahead and notified me that Dr. Doom, he's our client, but he's actually a bad guy. He has passed away. So we're going to go to Doom's record, and now I, as a Redtail user, all I have to remember to do is to go to that contact record and change the status. Malcolm, come back. Lay down. Stay. So we're on Victor Doom's record, and he's got a status of active client. I do want to point out he has no active workflows, and I'm going to go ahead and change his status. So I'm going to click Edit, and I'm going to change his status to deceased. Now, I do want to leave his category so that if I ever needed to run a report and see who of my AAA contacts are no longer clients, I can see who of them have a AAA category that is not equal to active, and then I can even filter that down by status and say, okay, well, how many of them passed away or how many of them left? And you're going to get valuable insights that way. So all I've done is change the status to deceased, and it's going to update, and I'm going to refresh the contact page. So quick refresh here, and now you'll see we've got one active workflow. So now if I scroll all the way to the bottom, I've got my tasks to go ahead and send condolences, acquire the death certificate, update date of death, and all of those tasks to do. Now, the good news is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We have a copy of this workflow for you that I'm going to drop into the webinar for you live folks, and then we're going to go ahead and provide it on the recorded version as well.
Thanks so much for joining us today for this particular session. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to give us a call at 800-206-5030, option 3 for support, or just shoot us an email over to support@redtailtechnology.com. Thanks a lot, and have a great day.
Malcolm, was that a good webinar? High five. Good boy.